My friends, coming back now, I'll start here with what's happening right now. The United Arab Emirates, where Dubai is located, as everyone already knows, were the target of a missile threat just a short while ago. The confirmation came from the country's own Ministry of Defense. And this is no small matter, folks. It doesn't always happen like this over there. The Emirates usually hold back this kind of information, minimize it, or simply don't say anything at all about what happens over there. And today they admitted it publicly. And that already says a lot about the magnitude of what just showed up on their radar. The alert reached the residents' cell phones and covered the Sharjah region, which is right next to Dubai. Minutes later, the authorities announced that everything was safe. And now comes the part that I'm not going to make anything up either. Up until the moment of this video recording, local time, 7:37 p.m., it's the 18th. The date is up here. Nothing has been reported about whether it was intercepted, if the missile was shot down in the air, or if it got close to the target. It's also not known if it was a real missile, a drone, or both. No one has claimed responsibility for this launch. Up until the moment of this recording, no one has taken credit. The initial assessment points to the routings, as always, and an Iranian news agency, Tasnim, published that the shots came from the IEM and that they have nothing to do with it. And if that's really the case, my friends, that thing traveled 2,000 kilometers to get there, near Dubai, which is the biggest financial center in the Gulf. And then the question remains, right? Will the Emirates respond to this attack today, or will they remain silent? And I'm letting you know right now, this information is still developing, and I'll come back to it as soon as I have solid material. And if anything comes up during this live, I'll also bring extra information about what's happening over there at this very moment. And if anyone out there is in Dubai right now, you can leave your statement here. Did you get this news on your phone, or was it only the residents of the Sharjah region who received the alert? But this isn't the most serious news of the day, and I need to take you here to the north of Israel. You're now seeing the map of northern Israel and the map of Syria. Early this morning, the most delicate front of all began to take shape. And this time, it's not against Iran. 8 consecutive attacks destroyed the runway of an airbase in northern Syria. Early this morning, folks, it wasn't in Damascus. Okay, and it wasn't right here on our border. It was 70 kilometers from the border with Turkey, just a few hours after a Turkish military delegation had visited exactly this airport or this runway. This happened right here, look, at this point here, very close to the border with Turkey. Israel didn't take responsibility for anything. Israeli sources even told the press that Israel had no involvement at all. But at the same time, another Israeli source came clean with an American TV network and explained the thinking behind the operation. 3 phases. Guys, this is how it always ends. The Israeli press can't admit it. Israel can't admit it here. And abroad, they end up saying whatever they want, right? Because of local censorship. And the American envoy to Syria didn't even wait for any of that, guys. He wrote publicly that the attacks were carried out by Israel. And now, why am I talking about Turkey here? You must be wondering if the runway is in Syria. What does one thing have to do with the other? Because that runway wasn't being renovated for the Syrian Air Force. The one working on that runway there was Turkey. Or rather, it's Turkey that's been building up a military presence inside Syria since Assad's fall. The target was on Syrian soil, but the project that was stopped there is Turkish. Okay, that's what was hit. And that's why the question being asked here in Israel today out loud is just one. Has the confrontation between Israel and Turkey started this time? And I'll give you my answer here, but it's going to be at the end of this live, and it's not the one you're expecting, guys. Not at all. Like I said, in the Middle East, there's never a moment of peace. While one side cools down, the other side suddenly starts to heat up out of nowhere without any warning. But before that, let's go over the 3 sentences here because they're worth more than any official statement. The first one explains why the Americans weren't caught off guard in this attack, which may have been Israeli. The second is a direct message to the new Syrian president El Jolano. And the third is the most revealing of all because it opens a door. This was, you can say clearly, the first strike attributed to Israel on Syrian soil since March. 5 months of silence broken all at once during the early morning. And today in Damascus, some information came up that makes this issue even bigger and more dangerous. The head of the UN Atomic Agency, Rafael Gross, announced that Syria is holding tons of nuclear material. And the foreign minister and Rafael Gross warned that this material will remain in Syrian hands. And the country that has been keeping an eye on this stockpile for months, along with Israel, is exactly the one that appears in this story from the very first line: Turkey. And I'm going to end this video with a report that Israel's military sensors cleared last week, which takes on a completely new meaning after what happened this morning. There's a country in the region giving advice to another on how to deal with Israel at the table. And the advice isn't what you might expect. Live from Israel, right where everything is happening, organizing as always the chaos of information for you. Local time 7:42 p.m. Leave your like right now because you're going to end up forgetting to do it at the end of this video. So go ahead and hit the like button now, guys. You've already forgotten. I know you have. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. And if you think you're already subscribed, check your subscription because YouTube has been canceling subscriptions for no reason. They just remove your subscription. And most importantly, turn on the notification bell because without it, you won't get the updates right away. And for those who don't want to depend on YouTube, there's the WhatsApp channel. Here's the QR code. Just click, point a phone at it, and scan this QR code. You'll go to my WhatsApp channel there, and I don't sell you anything at all. The only thing I do is share the links to these live stream before YouTube notifies you on your phone. So do that because sometimes YouTube notifies everyone and sometimes it doesn't. Then you come here and write, Davi, you disappeared. Where's Davi? He vanished, stopped making videos. That's not true, guys. It's YouTube that just stopped notifying you. Let's get started. First, here are the facts as they came in. The base is located in the eastern part of Idlib province, about 50 kilometers from Aleppo. There were 8 attacks on the runway. Okay, guys? The runway was hit in 4 passes by fighter jets. There was damage to the structure of the area near the runway and no casualties. Let me make it very clear before the fake news and the lefties start saying there were casualties. There were no casualties. Unidentified planes, according to the Arab press. No statement from the Israeli army, as always happens actually when the subject is Syria. And now let's take a look at the profile of this base because it tells the story of all of Syria so you can understand how important this place was. It changed hands, you could say, 3 times during the civil war. Rebels took control of this region, that is, rebels and Al-Julani. In 2015, Bashar al-Assad took it back. Then again in 2018, and the rebels took it again in November 2024, during the offensive that overthrew Assad's regime. Since then, it's been under the new Syrian government led by President Ahmad al-Sharan, who is al-Julani, the former commander of the Islamist militia Al-Qaeda in Syria, and he now governs the country. We always need to clarify who this guy really is because some people end up forgetting, right? They just use the name Ahmad al-Sharan and think he's just any diplomat. The facility had been out of operation for years according to reports. And it was actually Turkey that had been working on the renovations to get this place up and running again. Probably an airport. And there's another detail, which also came from the Syrian Observatory, which is based there in England. Foreign fighters, in other words, mercenaries, used to stay at that base and were sent away just recently, not long ago. In other words, they must have received information that an attack was on the way. Now here's the part. Let me show you some action footage for us to watch. These are archive images, okay folks? They're not current images. Don't be alarmed. This isn't happening right now. It was 2 weeks ago, not that long ago either. And now comes the part I want you to really understand because it explains the kind of message that was sent with this attack. They didn't hit the plane, they didn't hit the ammunition depot, they didn't hit soldiers, military personnel, people, nothing. They only hit the runway. And let me explain to you real quick why this matters. A runway is what turns a flat piece of land into a real airbase. That's what really makes all the difference. Without a complete runway, that field is just a big parking lot in the middle of nowhere. Hadar you can install in a few weeks. A hangar you can build in a few months. But a runway like this one here, paved with the right thickness to handle fighter jets, that's heavy work, it's expensive, and it takes a long time. And the one funding all of this is Turkey, folks. And at the same time, a runway is the easiest target to repair. No one dies in this kind of mission. Nothing catches fire in a chain reaction, right? Just that explosion right there. There's no funeral, no tragic headlines, no people in the streets demanding revenge. You just fix the asphalt and life goes on without any problem. And that's how I interpret what happened here. That wasn't an operation to destroy a capability. It was an operation to say no. That's what happened overnight. No speech, no statement, and no signature. Just the concrete ripped up. And now I owe you the 3 sentences I promised you at the beginning of this live, all from the same Israeli source. The first one, he said the following: Very sensitive intelligence information was passed on to the United States before this operation. In other words, Israel received or had access to very sensitive and important intelligence information, and they passed it on to the Americans directly to the top officials of the United States. The second, El Sharan, who is El Diolani, understands that he won't be able to act like the previous Syrian regime did. All of this was the Israeli source giving a statement to the international press. And the third said later on the same day, it's possible that he, El Diolani, didn't understand what happened or he didn't really know what happened over there. Three sentences, three completely different messages, and each one has a specific recipient. The first message is for the United States, for Trump, for Washington. We warned you before the attack. This right away dismisses any interpretation that Israel went over its allies' head without warning the United States or to start a new front, right? As they always say, Israel is always looking for a new front in the war. There are people who keep saying that nonsense. So there's that. They knew exactly what was happening. The second message is for Damascus. The owner of the house has changed, but the neighborhood rules remain the same. Bashar al Assad left and El Diolani came in, but the rules haven't changed. And the third is the most subtle of all. By saying that maybe the Syrian president didn't know that Israel attacked, and Israel offers him, El Diolani, a truly honorable way out. Whoever didn't know doesn't need to retaliate, doesn't need to attack. Whoever didn't know can say they'll investigate and the matter will end right there. And here in Israel, the rule with Syria remains the same as always. Don't confirm, but also don't deny anything. And as I told you here at the beginning of the live stream, Israeli sources even denied involvement when the press asked directly if it was us. But there's also a huge difference between not taking responsibility and explaining. A country that doesn't want any conversation just stays silent, that's it. A country that wants the other side to get the message. Guys, the other side is Turkey. He lets the explanation leak through the right channels, that is, through international channels, which is exactly what happened now. Let's put the planes here. This is Syria. These are the army's movements here. The explosions happened right here. Look, right at this point here. That's what happened at dawn. Okay. This here is Syria. I'll put our planes here. There was movement here of refueling planes. It was really intense overnight, and they haven't stopped all day today, guys. So let's go. And then there was this leak, right? And this non confirmation from Israel and the leak by the international media. This is on purpose, guys. And that's exactly what happened today. If this analysis is helping you understand what the headlines don't tell you, leave your like, smash that like button, but don't break your TV or your phone screen. Just leave a like, guys. It only takes a second and it really helps the channel reach more people. And let me tell you something, leaving a like doesn't give you away. I know you support Israel, you're a lefty, right? A friend who truly loves Israel but is still part of the lefty crowd. Leave a like, I'm sure your friends won't find out. They'll think the like was yours, that this like was yours. Because likes are anonymous, right? No one will know that you liked the channel here. Do it right now, I trust you. A true lefty does that. Or you can leave a dislike too, there's no problem with that. Now let's get to the question that explains the rest. Why is it that an old base, supposedly old and deactivated in northern Syria, is suddenly in the crosshairs right now? And to answer this, I need to explain what Turkey is doing inside Syria. Turkey supported for years the groups that overthrew Bashar al-Assad. And today it is the main, we could say, sponsor of the new government in Damascus, Duelo al-Ani. Since the fall of the regime, Ankara has been signing one agreement after another without much news coverage in the press. Almost no one reads anything about what happens there, but they have been signing one agreement after another with the Syrians and offering to rebuild what is left of the military structure there, including bases and runways. In other words, it's not humanitarian aid. It's a military presence being built on the territory of Israel's neighbor right here on our border. It's right here close to our border. And I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow morning Erdogan includes them in that Mecca agreement, in the Mecca pact, and adds Syria. Just imagine if that happens, guys. If they include Syria, any attack on Syria, any attack on a Syrian base would be a direct attack on Turkey. That's why this is very close to a new war. Okay? In other words, it's not humanitarian aid. Just to make that very clear. Okay? Let's go back to the clock from earlier this morning. The Turkish military was at that location working on repairing the runway, and during the night, the runway was destroyed. This isn't the first time this sequence has happened. In April of last year, the T4 base in central Syria was hit, and reports at the time linked that to Turkish plans to establish a military presence at that base. That's what Turkey wants. Here is the Strait of Hormuz in real time. And there's already public reporting and discussion about Turkey wanting to position its own air defense systems inside Syrian territory. Look, Turkey is slowly, right, getting closer to the border of Israel. And here comes our 30-second lesson. Because without it, none of this will make sense to you. The sky over Syria today, we can say it's practically controlled and open for the Israeli Air Force to do whatever they want there, to pass through, to use as a route, right? It's through this corridor that Israel monitors and acts against the transfer of weapons from Iran to Lebanon to Hezbollah and against attempts to reorganize pro Iranian militias inside Syria, against everything the Iranian Axis try to rebuild over there. That's why it needs to stay the way it is. And now just imagine a modern Turkish radar or a modern Russian radar there, along with a real army's air defense battery, not Yolani's army, installed right in the middle of this corridor. Suddenly, this sky is no longer free. Not because someone is going to shoot at an Israeli plane the next day. Not because Turkey is going to try to hit an Israeli plane, but because every operation has to be planned and monitored around a system that detects, alerts, and can also react. That's why an asphalt runway in Idlib becomes a matter of national security here in Israel. Israel's problem was never the airfield. The problem is who wants that airfield. And here I return once again to a thesis I've been repeating on this channel. Iran, my friends, shouts a lot, every day and all the time. And Turkey, what does it do? It builds in silence. They spent almost 50 years announcing it openly, even put up a timer. Did you know there was a countdown to the end of Israel right there in Tehran? There was a clock counting down the days to the end of Israel. They spent almost 50 years counting down to Israel's destruction and ended up with a broken economy. That's the truth. The ports are closed and the Strait of Hormuz is truly blocked for them. The other one doesn't announce anything at all. Turkey is just silent. They sign agreements there in Syria, send delegations, finance reconstruction, build bases, and slowly take over the space that Iran lost in that region. Remember that before, Turkey was dominated by Iran, Syria was dominated by Iran, right? And now it's Turkey. An enemy who shouts, you can hear coming, guys. When someone shouts from afar, you can hear them getting closer. The other type, you only notice when they're already settled right next to you. And against an adversary who works in silence, the response doesn't come in an official statement either. Israel, for example, won't admit to this. And now let's look at the international reaction. And there's a layer to it that almost nobody is really reading, guys. That same American envoy published a harsh written criticism. He wrote that Washington is deeply concerned about the confirmed Israeli attacks on that base and described it as an unnecessary escalation that does not contribute to the stability of the region. He added that the government of El Sharan, El Jolani, has been choosing the path of reducing tensions with Israel. And he asked that both sides prefer dialogue over new military incidents. It's a strong, direct criticism of Israel, folks, said publicly from ally to ally. Remember, it was said by him, not by Trump. Trump did not comment. No one from the high ranks commented, especially because they knew about this, folks. They knew about it. But the position of the person who spoke explains exactly the statement. Yeah, look at this. A statement from Dubai. I'm in Dubai, and after months, we actually received an alert on our phones. There it is. Someone in Dubai, a follower of the channel, confirming that it's real. This diplomat is an American ambassador, my friends, the one who just spoke in Ankara. He has publicly supported the new Syrian government since day one, and he was the one who personally mediated the talks between Israel and Syria, which took place in Paris, for those who remember, at the beginning of the year. Those talks created a direct channel between the two countries under American supervision. Okay, that happened there. Look, let's read this. Pay attention. A new piece of information has just come out. The United Arab Emirates have just announced that Iran launched the two missiles we talked about at the beginning of the live stream in our direction. One fell outside our territorial waters and the other inside our territorial waters. Official statement from the United Arab Emirates. It just came out right now, so it's confirmed it wasn't the Houthis, it was the Iranians, folks. The Iranians. What's going to happen? Even tonight, folks. Look at what's happening right now. What we talked about at the beginning of the live stream has now been confirmed. As I already said, I'm following it in real time. As soon as more information comes out, I'll bring it to you. Okay? Now, just to remind you, talking about this Tom Barak, he's the envoy who said all this about Syria. He's part of the American government, and his portfolio covers Turkey and Syria. Nothing could be more natural than for him to defend his own turf, right? When someone messes with his turf, that's his turf. And there's something that the Israeli source itself had already mentioned too. The intelligence was passed beforehand to the top officials in Washington. The ambassador complains in public, but those who needed to know knew before it happened. That's an ally disagreeing with the course being taken, not an ally turning their back. Israel and the United States have already argued about Syria before, and the alliance still stands to the despair of whom? The leftists, right? The mortadelas and the commanders whose closest experience to a war was at a shooting range in Brazil. From Damascus came the predictable, of course. The Syrian Foreign Ministry condemned it in the strongest terms and called it an unjustified act of aggression, spoke of a violation of sovereignty and a dangerous escalation, and called for a firm stance from the United Nations Security Council. From Turkey, the silence lasted almost the entire day, we could say since dawn. No threats, no reaction from Erdogan's cabinet. Just a phone call between the Turkish foreign minister and the Syrian foreign minister, without Ankara publicly connecting one thing to the other. And at the end of the afternoon today, here in Israel, right, Turkey spoke out alongside Egypt. The Turkish foreign ministry strongly condemned the attack and declared the following: the action against that base violates Syria's territorial integrity, as if they weren't using the base themselves, right? And called on the international community to take a firm stand against what it called growing Israeli aggression. And now listen carefully to what the statement doesn't say. It doesn't say that Turkey lost a project they were working on. It doesn't say they were there, right? We're talking about Syria. It doesn't say that the Turkish delegation had visited that same place, that same runway. Hours before the attack, it talks about Syria's sovereignty as if Ankara were an outraged spectator, as if they weren't investing a lot of money there, guys. As if they weren't investing a lot of money. Anyone complaining on the neighbor's behalf is trying to avoid admitting what they were building inside the neighbor's house. And just look at the size of this response. The project was Turkish and the loss was Turkish. And Ankara's response was to join the list of condemnations, right alongside Egypt, which has nothing to do with this airstrip. No threat of retaliation from the Turkish side, no deadline, no measures, for now. Someone who gets hit and responds with a statement isn't without a reaction, they're calculating. Exactly that. And the calculation showed up a few hours later over in the United States. The Turkish press reported that Erdogan and Trump spoke on the phone, and in that conversation, all of this happened today, folks. Erdogan supposedly asked the Americans to try the diplomatic route with Iran and even offered himself to be the mediator. The White House didn't publish anything about this call, so let's treat this as the Turkish version of the story, without confirmation from the other side. But if it's true, the picture becomes very clear for us here, especially for the channel. On the same day they lose an important airstrip for them in Syria, Turkey offers to be the bridge between Americans and Iranians. This, my friends, is not about any vocation for peace. That's not Erdogan's goal. It's Erdogan buying what? Importance. Because whoever is useful to the Americans gets protection for what they're doing in Syria. Do you understand the move? Let me negotiate with Iran, but hold Israel back. Okay, leave Israel out of this. Don't let Israel attack us. Hold them back. Do me that favor. And now I need to tell you what's happening in Damascus as well, this very afternoon, not yesterday or last week, because this is the piece that helps explain, let's say, part of the day, or maybe the whole day. The director of the UN nuclear agency, a lot of people didn't even know that, and they're about to find out now. Rafael Grossi was in the Syrian capital and gave an interview alongside the Syrian foreign minister and announced the amount. For those who don't understand what I'm talking about, go back to the beginning of the live stream. You'd understand, guys. There are two topics here. There are tons of nuclear material stored in Syrian territory. It's there, guys. The Syrian foreign minister spoke right after him and chose his words carefully, saying that the material is not dangerous, that it remains under Syria's custody with guarantees from the agency, International Atomic Energy Agency, and the country has the right to use atomic energy for peaceful purposes. But they want to use atomic energy. And who is going to prepare the conditions to store that safely? Let me give you the context here, folks, because without it, this news will go unnoticed by you, and the idiot who only reads the headline and not the rest of the news won't know either. So, idiot, focus a little bit, use what little concentration you have left. In 2007, the Israeli Air Force destroyed a secret reactor that was being built in eastern Syria with help from, you know who? From North Korea in 2007. Bashar al-Assad denied for 11 years that it was real or that it even existed, until Israel went there and destroyed it. Israel only admitted to the operation in 2018. Only admitted that they destroyed it in 2018. What was left of that program there, the uranium that had already been processed, and the remains of nuclear material was kept in a hidden storage facility, which the international press nicknamed Site 99. And here's the point that connects everything I've told you today. The American and Israeli press have published in recent weeks that Israel has been closely monitoring this storage facility because there's nuclear material there. And that Israel warned the United States that if that material wasn't removed, wasn't taken out of there, or if the new Syrian government tried to access it in any way, Israel would take action. And what was on Israel's radar had an address: Turkey, which helped put al-Shara el-Diolane in power, could give Damascus the path to that stockpile or turn that stockpile into something worse. That's why the Americans got involved in this story. About 3 weeks ago, with Washington mediating, an agreement was reached for the agency to remove the material from there. And today, in the Syrian capital, the foreign minister announced that the material will stay in Syria with guarantees under supervision and by agreement. But it stays in Syria. Guarantees from whom? Supervision by whom? Does anyone actually trust this oversight? I'm not going to tell you here that one thing cancels out the other because negotiations are still open and the removal of this material can still happen. I really hope it gets out of there. But put together the two halves of the same day. At dawn, the runway that Turkey was going to repair turns into a crater. And in the afternoon, Damascus announces that the uranium isn't leaving Syria. And it's here. Uranium, guys, don't get confused. I'm not talking about Iran. I'm talking about Syria, right next door. Okay? Uranium there in Syria. And here I need to bring you the report, which in my mind is directly related to all of this. That's why I say it's so important to put things together and try to put the puzzle together so you can understand what you read last week. So you can try to understand what came out this week because everything is connected, guys. This news came out last week on Kan here in Israel, which is Israel's public broadcaster, by Israel's Arab Affairs correspondent, and it only aired because the military censorship allowed it to be released. And not everything was fully released. There are things that weren't cleared. After holding onto this information for weeks, the military censorship, there is military censorship. Everyone goes through the same military censorship. I can't say everything because there is military censorship over everything here. The content is as follows. Pay attention. Authorities from a country in the region advised authorities from another country to sign a peace agreement with Israel. Fake agreement, and the advice wasn't real, guys. The recommendation was to sign the agreement as a new tactical move. That is, sign it for now. To keep everything quiet, to show flexibility, to create a sense of peace, of calm in Israel, and use this time to prepare militarily. And then, at a convenient moment, break the agreement and move on to confront Israel. Look at this, guys. Do you really believe in a signed agreement with these people? It's impossible, man. One country advising the other, go ahead and quickly sign a peace agreement with Israel, solve this problem, and get ready to attack Israel from behind. The expression that appears in this report is this: literally, lull Israel to sleep. And the one who gave the advice and didn't hide the model they were copying, they mentioned Yahya Sinwar. Remember Sinwar? Yahya Sinwar, the same Sinwar from Hamas, who spent years signaling that he wanted calm in exchange for calm while preparing what? October 7th. And now I want you to understand three things. Three from this report, because each one of them is extremely serious. The first thing is that these conversations happened at the highest level between leaders and in recent months. This isn't backstage gossip, guys. It's not. It was cleared by military censors, which means intelligence had been tracking all of this. The second thing is that Israel has known the full content of these conversations for a long time, and the two countries involved don't know that their secret has been exposed like this. They have no idea that Israel knows much more than what was made public. The third thing, military censorship has prohibited the publication of the names of the two countries involved, the one that advised the other to sign. And that's exactly where the discussion begins here inside Israel. The Prime Minister's advisor got ahead and wrote just one line to take the name off the list. He said the following: it's not Egypt. In other words, it's not Egypt that's asking a third country that doesn't have an agreement with Israel to sign with Israel. Egypt is not involved in this. The Prime Minister's advisor said so. The National Security Minister said the following. He said that those who thought they could entrust the safety of our children to agreements and guarantees from our neighbors got slapped in the face. And now I'm going to tell you what I think about all this. I just can't read today's report without thinking about Turkey, guys. There's no way to read this without thinking about Turkey. Think about who has the profile to give advice like that. It has to be a country with plenty of influence over its neighbors, with its own military project underway, and with the patience to play the long game. Turkey. It has to be someone who doesn't shout and who builds in silence. And it has to be someone who sees an agreement with Israel as just a step, not as the final goal. And add that to everything they've already talked about throughout this live stream. A country setting up a military base inside Syria, renovating a runway just 70 kilometers from its own border, and that last year had already tried to establish itself at another airfield inside Syria. I really can't prove that it's them, that Turkey is behind this. I can't prove it, guys. And I also need to present the other side because that's how I work here on this channel. That's how I work here, Lefty. There's no other way. Okay? Part of the Israeli press described the two involved, in other words, the two countries, as Arab countries. That's how the press put it here. And Turkey is not an Arab country. Okay? It's not an Arab country. Then you start speculating about who this other country could be. Other publications only mention countries from the region without specifying them as Arab. So it fits in the right place, right? That's my hypothesis. Based on what I have here, and with good reason, but without official confirmation that it's Turkey. Turkey advising Syria to make this kind of agreement. But one thing I can tell you for sure, on the day military censorship is lifted, and it will happen, and these two names are released, a lot of people will come back to this topic, and the map of the Middle East will become much easier to understand after it's revealed who these countries are. There are people saying it could even be the United Arab Emirates. Some people are saying that. Okay, I don't want to believe it. I don't believe it's them, especially because Israel provided air defense. It was during the war, and I already knew about this information, and that wouldn't have happened if it were them. Okay, so I rule out that possibility. And before I wrap up here, two things happened closer to home, you could say. The first happened on our northern border. Israeli fighter jets hit targets at two locations in southern Lebanon last night. And since early on, there's been intense drone activity over there, over Dahiyeh, the suburb in southern Beirut, which is the political and military headquarters of Hezbollah. It's the same logic as the airstrip in Syria, the landing strip that was destroyed. But here on our side, the terrorist group tries to reorganize and bring weapons back. And the work to prevent that from happening doesn't take a break, folks. I take vacations, but that job doesn't take vacations. The second one comes from Tehran, and it's one of those pieces of news that dismantles an entire week of optimistic headlines about the Gaza Strip. Remember all those people celebrating what was happening in Gaza? So let's go. Last week, Washington announced that Hamas had agreed to start handing over their weapons. Remember that? The official representative of Hamas in Tehran, not in Ankara, not in Egypt, in Tehran, declared the following today. The weapon remains as long as there is occupation, end quote. Did you hear where this denial came from? It didn't come from Gaza, folks. It didn't come from Qatar. It didn't come from Turkey. It came from the office that the terrorist group maintains inside Iran. As long as the occupation continues. And what is the occupation for Hamas? The occupation for Hamas, my friends, is not the Gaza Strip, is not the yellow line. For Hamas, the occupation is the existence of Israel on Israeli territory. Here, they deal with it. They look at all of this. Live shot there, my leftist Brazilian friend who loves, these people. They consider it occupied territory, all of Israel. It's not just Judea and Samaria. So when he says, as long as there's occupation, he's referring to all Israeli territory. Leave Israel and we'll hand over the weapons. Now to whom, right? The same Iran, guys. It came from the office which is inside Iran. The same Iran that keeps the strait closed and its economy in shambles. This is a fact, much to the despair of the leftists. Only those who got paid to go there, right? Actually, they're enjoying just a little of the Iranian money. But the rest, there's no money over there. The same Iran that funds weapons and hosts each arm of this axis. And that's why I keep insisting here that these fronts are not separate issues, my friends. It's all one axis with different offices and addresses. That's all. They're different agencies, but it's all the same thing. Whoever promises disarmament in Gaza and keeps an office in Tehran isn't disarming anything at all. They're just buying time, which is the only currency this Shiite axis still has left. And now I owe you the answer to that question from the beginning. Did the confrontation between Israel and Turkey start with tonight's attack on that airstrip inside Syria? And my answer is no. And that's exactly why the situation is serious. A confrontation between two armies has a beginning. We know how it starts. There's a front, there's a relative set of rules. We don't know when it ends, but everyone knows when it starts. What happened this morning is something else. It's a red line being drawn on the ground without anyone signing anything underneath it. And the message wasn't for Syria. Today, Syria is broken and divided. The government there spent the whole year, the entire year, trying to negotiate a security agreement with Israel and doesn't have an air force to threaten anyone. The target of the message was the country's project to establish a military presence inside Syria and near Israel's border. And here's the part that makes this case more difficult than everything we've been discussing in recent weeks. With Iran, the red line has always been very clear. It was about centrifuges, it's the Strait of Hormuz, it's the Iranian missile with a very long range, it's the enriched uranium. The whole world recognizes that as a threat. The Revolutionary Guard has already been declared a terrorist organization in several Western countries, and the debate is only about what to do with all of this. With Turkey, there's none of that. What's at stake is radar, runway, base, and military presence. And they've never denied that they want to reach Jerusalem and dominate. They've never denied that. But none of this appears in headlines as a threat. That's what's different. That's the big difference. And the country that's building all this is also a member of NATO. It does business with all of Europe and sits at the table with the Americans as an ally. There is no international pressure against the airstrip being built in Syria. There is no UN resolution about an ally's radar. And that's why the response came the way it did too, without Israel's signature, without a statement, and without victims. When you can't discuss the matter in the assembly, you respond on the ground. And I'll finish here with today's Hebrew word, which chose itself. And for those who want to know, this word will be written in the description of this video. Go to the description, it will be there in Hebrew and also how it's pronounced in Portuguese. And the word is maslul. Mazlu. Mazlu. That's exactly how you pronounce it, guys. Mazlu means runway. It can be an airport runway, but it also means the route, the path, the way someone takes to get somewhere. We use this word all the time here in Israel. The bus maslul, right? The bus route, the walking route, the career path. And that's what happened in northern Syria. In both senses of the word at the same time. They destroyed an asphalt runway to block a path that was being opened. Because in the Middle East, whoever controls the runway decides which path the neighbor will be able to take. And that's a decision that Israel can't leave in the hands of others. And for those who think our only problem here is Iran, for those who still believe that, today alone answers all of that. Missiles heading toward the Emirates. Missiles fired by Iran toward the Emirates. Runway destroyed in Syria at dawn. Uranium that just won't leave Damascus no matter what. And the report saying that someone advised a neighbor to sign a peace deal with Israel just to break it later. In the Middle East, it's always like this. When one side cools down, the other side heats up. And I'm already setting the topic for the next live, which will be about Iran. We're going to have another live today. Okay. I don't know what time I'll do this live, maybe 2 in the morning because it's already 8 at night. But there's a lot to discuss when it comes to Iran. It's a hot topic. There's Trump's zigzag now. One last post from Trump to drive the left is crazy. Because while we're looking north today, a lot is happening on the other side. In the Strait, in the Yemen, and within the regime itself. I'll save that for next time so we can give you the time it deserves because we've already hit 37 minutes here. And I'm going straight on, you know from where? From the mountains of Judea. Putting the pieces together one by one in a way the mainstream media will never do for you folks. So subscribe now, turn on the notification bell, and share this analysis in your family group. Quickly, because time is short. And for those of you who want to become a channel member, there's a little button down here, become a member. That's a way for you to support the channel. You can also support us through Pix. The Pix address is right down here. You can also send a super sticker, a super chat. Okay, the channel doesn't have any sponsorships. We have our caravan for 2027 here. For anyone who wants more information, just go to the link vivisrael.com.br. That's the address. Go there. All the information is there. You can sign up for the caravan. And we'll meet here in Israel. I'll be in this caravan too, guys. Together in a caravan in 2027 after all of this is over. Because it will be over. Absolutely certain. Soon. It won't take much longer, guys. This has already taken too long. Something big is on the way. And something tells me that this big thing should happen before the elections here in Israel. Before the elections in Israel and before the elections in the United States, oil keeps going up. Oil hasn't gone down. Let's check the price of oil here. The price of oil, right? Look at that. The price of oil is 91.29, 91.23. In other words, oil is still high. Oil hasn't dropped, guys. It hasn't gone back to 70. So it's still going up because the strait is here. We can see it. The strait is still closed, right? I'll put it here. Look, closed. The strait is closed. There's no one passing through. Look at the number of ships outside, guys. Look at the amount. The Americans say they're discreetly taking oil from this region, and a lot of oil. And absolutely nothing is coming out of Iran, according to the latest reports here from the Americas themselves. And even the Arab countries say that nothing has come out of the Strait of Hormuz. I'll be back later with more information live from Israel. I thank everyone who sent super chats and super stickers from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. Hugs to all my friends in Israel. See you on the next live stream.